What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, the official podcast of MetalNexus.net. I am your co-host, Daniel Terry, and with me, as always, is the actual host, Jonathan Beatty.
I don't know if I'm the actual host. We're hosts in both regards. That's not even a sentence.
Well, you know, now that your name's not prominently displayed on the podcast, I'm taking all kinds of crazy liberties. So,
are you taking the statues that those liberties entail?
No.
Okay.
No, that was like a tasty mint level joke there, man.
Hey, that was a good joke.
Hey,
I mean, I'm not asking
jokes.
what Howard Jones smells like. I'm sorry, it's not up to your level of sophistication.
Fresh coffee.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Speaking of coffee, how about our sponsor, the podcast sponsor, the Bean Bastard? That's right, the Bean Bastard. Keeping you awake with all the delicious brands of coffee they have. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick you up some today. Speaking of today and drinking, Dan, what do you got?
Water today.
Oh, man. How many ABVs is that?
0.0002.
So why don't you say you're drinking a classy O'Doul's NA?
Well, that's the thing. O'Doul's taste like garbage. So I don't even know why I would drink. Like, if I was going to drink fake beer, the least they could do is, like, make it taste better than, you know, bottom of the barrel beer.
Well, I mean, they're not going to waste all their time and effort to make something taste good that probably no one's drinking.
Right, but if nobody's drinking it, why are they a business?
I don't know. I feel like it's almost like a failed batch that they, like, mess something up and they're like, all right, you just take the alcohol out of that? Yeah, okay, let's just sell that.
Didn't ferment, right?
Yeah. We messed up in the fermentation process.
So disgusting. Well, you know what's not disgusting? John, you recently just had a pretty long chat with Deron Miller.
These are your favorite kind of chats, the long ones.
I actually really enjoyed this one.
Sadly,
there was some rabbit holes that were gone down that I wish I'd have been around to really experience in real time.
That's a.
Now, you guys had a pretty long chat. Definitely some really interesting stuff in there. And I don't mean to say interesting condescendingly, but interesting just the way the conversation flowed. One of the things that really stood out to me early on was the whole idea of record labels signing bands just to keep tabs on them, to keep them from reaching a certain level of success. I wouldn't go full on conspiracy theory on it, but it's definitely something interesting to think about, especially now in 2019 where the music industry itself is kind of a joke. Like, there's a whole lot of dudes just in an office shooting in the dark as to what they think is going to work.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting thinking back in the early 2000s that, you know, maybe these major labels couldn't have an independent do-it-yourself band get big on their own, or people might start getting ideas.
Yeah, I don't know. That was that was definitely a very interesting rabbit hole that we went down, and I really wasn't expecting it to go there. I think if you actually listen to the conversation, you might hear how taken aback I was by that sentiment, and. But, you know, it's funny. I've kind of brought that up to a handful of other people since this conversation happened. And I would say a good, 60% of the people I've said it to are like, yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. And that's kind of made me rethink the whole thing of being like, well, fuck. Should I be thinking that way?
I don't know about all of that, though. I believe it partially. Maybe there's, for every crazy thing that's thrown out there, there's always one instance where it was the case. You know,
yeah.
But I think realistically, anytime you bring the idea of a major faceless corporation into things, your average person is always going to be like, oh yeah, they definitely did that horrible thing. You know, whatever it is. You know? It's like, dude, did you hear that Victory Records makes a lot of money just by clubbing baby seals to death? Did you hear about that? They're like, yeah, doesn't surprise me. I mean, look at Victory. I mean, come on. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. It was really weird. I mean, and the fun thing, too, kind of about this conversation, and it was really hard not to... I mean, because Deron obviously is best known for his time in CKY, but he's currently in his newer band, 96 Bitter Beings, which sort of morphed from World Under Blood, which is sort of like his death metal project. I also
It's
want to
awesome.
make a note to anybody listening to this. I think a couple of times I made mention of the Chris Raab podcast that he did. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's like an hour and a half long conversation. So in doing that dive and listening to that, going back, watching the old CKY DVDs, which I was kind of glad I actually had those, and listening back to all of Deron's discography, it was just kind of really weird to kind of look back on that time frame of the music industry, thinking about, something that we talked about in the Ryan Wambacher episode, the early days of the internet, and how CKY were one of at the forefront, really, of like message boards and interacting with their fans, something that now seems like, well, yeah, that's what Twitter's for. That's what social media is for. But that didn't exist.
I like that you guys talked about that and how they answered all the questions, because I remember that. Like, I remember Ask CKY, and you could ask him anything.
Yeah.
And it's funny because me and a buddy of mine used to just stay up real late, and we'd ask just like the dumbest questions.
Did you ever get them answered?
They answered. Man, I really wish I could pull all that up. I'm sure if I went on Wayback Machine, I could probably pull up some of the answers, but which I might do if I can find it in the next 24 hours or whatever. I'll have John post a link to it or something, because it's hilarious. Like, the first one we asked was like a really obvious one, like, where do babies come from? And their response was something along the lines of like, well, you see, when a man and a woman love each other very much, they hire a stork, and then the stork brings and so, because like not all their answers were like dead serious.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's CKY. I mean, how do you
Yeah.
but no, we asked like, where do babies come from? And then another one was like, why do they sell hot dog buns in packs of 10 but hot dogs in packs of 8? It's just stuff like that. And just because we were just kids, and we thought it was hilarious. But it was funny that even if it was stupid, it was obvious that like that was one of the first times ever where you had you actually had a band that you had a direct line of access to.
Yeah.
And that never happened before. I mean, like you could write bands letters, like I used to write Zayo letters all the time, and stuff like that. But like, sometimes you got a response, sometimes not, and if you did get a response, especially from a really big band like CKY, you don't know if they're reading their fan mail or their letters or anything like that, or the email account that they set up. But this was the first time where it was like, no, this is legit the band. You ask them a question and they'll answer it online. It seems so crazy now in 2019, but I mean, back then that was a huge, huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was kind of the thing I kind of started hitting on was, CKY was really one of the first bands, and Deron, I mean, kind of being at the forefront of a lot of it, was one of the first to do a lot of things that we just see so often now. And it's like they were kind of the prototypical internet band, as far as like the fact that, like I was saying, like, going back again to the Wambi episode we did, where you're talking about mp3.com. I remember trying to drastically search for the demo versions of, stuff that would become IDR, and looking for, Brain's Freestyle from like CKY2, or, just looking for very specific things that were only available on the DVD because they had the specific songs that you were looking for that weren't on Volume 1, Volume 2, IDR, and so forth. And it was like, if you didn't live in Westchester or around the Westchester area, you couldn't get Foreign Objects, you couldn't get Oil. These were things that you saw Jess and Deron talk about being in these bands, and you saw footage of them playing these songs, but you had no way to get them if you didn't purchase them from them when they first were released. So it's like the internet was the way to find it. And a lot of times, unfortunately, what you would find is someone going like, oh, new CKY song, and it was just someone's song that was not CKY.
Right.
Something else we didn't talk about on the Wambi thing, that disappointment of spending all that time downloading something just to be like, oh, fuck, what the hell is this? Sometimes you'd be like, oh, this is tight, but like you then would have no idea who the fuck it was because they didn't tag themselves in any way, shape, or form.
Or what was really annoying, to bring file sharing into it, because I think enough times passed. There could be FBI agents headed to my house right now, but like when I would download stuff off of LimeWire or Kazaa or whatever, like I remember like when Korn's Untouchables came out, and I was trying to get MP3s of that, and it was like always these really, it was clearly not Korn. Like you download this song, And it sounded like Korn because the bass was like a slap bass or something like that. The vocalist wouldn't sound anything like John Davis. And a lot of the times it was bands trying to get people familiar with their music. But like the problem with that was that like all I'm thinking is, well, this isn't Korn. Delete.
Yeah. All that aside, talking about nostalgia and stuff like that, let's get into my conversation with Deron Miller of 96 Bitter Beings, and we will talk to you guys afterwards.
What up? This is band Margera letting everybody know to check out BREWtally Speaking Podcast. They talk to members of CKY, GWAR, and a fuckload of other bands, so check them out on iTunes, Spotify, and whatever else you listen to, podcasts. Cheers.
So I have the pleasure this evening of talking to Deron Miller of 96 Bitter Beings, who recently just put out their newest album, Campaign, via Distant Recordings. How are you doing this evening?
I'm fantastic, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
we are going to definitely get to the 96 Bitter Beings, but in listening to the new record that just came out, it kind of definitely put me in a nostalgic tip. And maybe go back and start listening to the wealth of a discography that you have created over the last, 20, 25 years at this point?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Unbelievable for me.
The interesting thing, and I'm not necessarily I don't want to harp too much on the CKY stuff as far as, like, I guess I'll just kind of ask the questions, because I think, where I've kind of come from with this is kind of interesting. But I was thinking back to the early days of the old CKY website and the message board, specifically the Ask CKY feature.
Yeah, that was great, wasn't it?
It was, and it really
By the
made
time
me...
it had ended, it had ended, I think we had answered maybe 12,000 questions or something like that. I don't know where all that information is now.
Yeah.
I hope it's still around somewhere.
Oh, they say that everything on the internet never goes away.
Yeah, that's what I hear. But, it's funny because on a lot of that stuff, is like you said, 20 years old, and like there's probably some stuff that I would read that I wrote that I don't agree with anymore, and there's probably stuff that I wrote that I would still agree with. So it's interesting because as you get older, you change and you learn from mistakes, and it's just an interesting read, I would think.
I definitely think it would be a disservice if you didn't call it An Answer Can Be Found at this point on something.
Right. Yeah.
But in thinking about that, you guys really were so far ahead of what would become basically modern day social media and having access to, for lack of a better term, celebrities or someone that you want to have a direct connection with and ask them questions that you've always wanted to know before the internet became what it has become. So when you kind of look back on it then, did you guys ever get, like, I don't know if flack is the word, but just kind of get like some weird, like, you guys really shouldn't be doing this, like,
No,
just
never.
No.
Everybody appreciated it. Everybody saw it as something that was innovative at the time. Even Island Records was so they didn't understand it at first, but they eventually started to have their other artists do it. There was Ask Bon Jovi at one point. There was Ask Hoobastank, and it was interesting because those bands that were bigger than us didn't get nearly as many questions as we did. But of course, we were very, very interested in answering it and doing them every day. I remember there was a time when I was on that computer every day because for me, I don't want to be associated with the word celebrity. I never really wanted to be famous. I don't find any kind of satisfaction in being a celebrity. I know celebrities, and most of them are not happy, and that's not why I don't want to be associated with that, but just because I'm a fan of music myself, so I don't want to put myself above our fans.
Right.
Because, as a fan of other bands, they choose to put themselves, most of them choose to put themselves above their fans. And the reason why we got so many inquiries and more inquiries than much more successful acts was because we were answering the questions, and we wanted to answer the questions. Bon Jovi didn't want to answer questions, so they didn't get that kind of connection with their fan base. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as far as CKY, I mean, we were labeled so many different things when we started. Punk, skate rock, which is something that we were not. Nu metal was when that was the big thing. That was something we certainly were not.
No.
And we were basically just an anomaly musically, and as our attitude. Our attitude was we're not, above our fans. We're not too good to talk to people that admire us, and I don't understand how anybody could feel that way, because your fans are what make you who you are.
Right.
I mean, you're nothing without them. So if you're going to put them down below you, that they don't deserve to talk to you, they don't deserve to meet you, then they're not gonna stick around. They're not gonna be loyal. So it's not necessarily to keep them loyal, but it's a natural thing, Yeah. It was never a question of whether or not, did I want to speak to and meet the fans? Absolutely. Every day, every night. So yeah, I mean, nobody had anything against it. I mean, people probably looked down on us for stooping, quote, so low to, address every single question that our fans had for us, but I don't see that as something to not be proud of.
No, for sure. Whose idea was it to do that? Because, I mean, like I said, the internet was really kind of in its infancy at that point, and to come up with something so, like a direct line, basically, to the three of you was, like we're saying, it didn't exist. So it's like, thinking back on that, it's like, who came up with this idea, and then did you...
Well, back then musically, people were separated into trends, into mainstream trends, and certain music was not, certain music was considered passé, and some music was considered fresh and new, and we wanted to be, we didn't see that as being right. We didn't see that as being a certain band shouldn't be successful because of what they look like or how they sound.
Right.
Or, just because this band has dreadlocks and a low-hanging bass, they should be selling out arenas and all that stuff. And, when Nirvana came around, it completely destroyed all the heavy metal bands. And I don't to this day understand why they couldn't have been, together. Why it was unacceptable to be interested in that music that they were interested in last year, and all of a sudden abandon that for this thing. Why not like both? Why can't both live in harmony? Why can't both be on the radio? So it's kind of like musical racism in a way.
Yeah, totally.
But I don't like to get political. Obviously that statement doesn't carry much merit, but yeah, I mean, it was musical racism, and we wanted to, express that if you like something and it's good, then like it. And we were not, we because of our attitude, we started to get such a huge following that the mainstream couldn't ignore us, but they could keep us down. Sometimes I think that maybe we got signed to a major label so that they could control how popular we got and how popular we didn't get. And that's a theory, but I'm not sure that, I want to think too much about that or accuse anyone of that. It's possible. It's possible. I've heard of it happening, But we just wanted people to know that like what you like, do what you want, and having the opportunity to talk specifically to individual people about that was a gift. It's and it was extraordinary, and it started very, very slowly. It wasn't an overnight thing. It was slowly progressing, because when the internet started, we got a website, and people would, put statements on there, and we would respond to them. And people were so surprised that we were responding because we were, quote unquote, this huge famous band, but we really didn't feel like that. At least I didn't.
Right. It's kind of funny, actually. You were talking about these. I don't know if conspiracy is the word I want to use per se either,
yeah,
but
I know.
It's funny though, because like, as someone who listens to, and granted, like, I've not done fuck all of anything in the music industry. I'm just someone who listens to a lot of people like yourself and others and industry insiders talk, and just kind of take what they've learned over their 20, like someone like Brian Slagle, for instance. Like anytime I listen to that dude talk about business, which usually he tries not to, because he always just wants to come across as a fan who lucked into having a 30-year career. But, you know, when he does kind of delve into the business side of things, you can tell that it's someone who has run his label through passion and so forth. But
that's right. Yeah, Metal Blade has definitely been a very varied label. They even though their name is Metal Blade, they have signed bands like, you know, Goo Goo Dolls and stuff like that, and that's where their big success came from, was a mainstream, you know, alternative rock band.
Yeah.
But they never lost sight of underground metal and trying to sign bands that were onto something and that could potentially, you know, be successful in the end.
Yeah. But it's been interesting in listening to some of these people talk, and as you were just kind of saying, like, you know, sometimes bands get signed solely so others can control their success or lack thereof. And it's like, you know, when you hear, you know, I've heard some stories where it's like, you know, and of course it's Victory Records, so take that with a grain of salt. But I mean, some of the shit where it's like, okay, so we're going to sign this band and then we're going to take out full page ads and charge 6 other bands for the full page ad, in addition to the other band that we said we were charging for the full page ad. And we're going to do things where they're just never going to recoup and they're always going to be under our thumb financially. And it's like, when you hear shit like that, it's like, well, it's just so fucked that it's like, when you hear stuff like that.
It's a conspiracy theory. I mean, I don't know exactly what goes on behind closed doors over at Victory Records, but I mean, that's certainly possible. It's happened. It's definitely happened. I mean, if you can think of it and they can get away with it, I'm sure it's happened. I mean, there's no moral. Oh no. You know, there's no moral objection. You know, these record companies are in business, you know, to make money, and they're not going to let a moral, you know, you know, they're not going to let morals get in the way of whatever they do. If they, you know, the problem with record companies and bands is that record companies are dealing with people who have feelings and who have talent and who are passionate about their work. Companies that sell items that are inanimate objects, like a bottle of Coke or an action figure, let's say, you know, those things, if you put out an action figure and it doesn't sell and you stop making it, that's fine. Nobody gets hurt, except maybe the person that designed it or whatever.
Right.
But when you're dealing with a band and the band is passionate about what they do, and the band could even be a genius thing, be an incredible band, but if you put it out there and you don't give it the proper promotion, or maybe you do give it the proper promotion, when you decide that you no longer want to work with this band because they have lost money for you and you let them go, it's, you know, I can imagine where, you know, it can be very depressing, and it's kind of like it gives that band a sense of failure, you know, and you can't find many bands that will say that their experience with their record company has been nothing but amazing,
right?
You know? But, you know, yeah, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with artists, and you know, if a record sells, it doesn't matter if the music was good. If it sells, they're going to do your next one, and they're going to give you the money.
Right.
And it's all about that. It's not about it's not personal, but it should be more personal, because if you're going to invest in a band because you like them initially and you think that they could go somewhere, you should probably have a little bit of commitment to it once it doesn't, maybe the first time it doesn't, you know, pan out well. But they run these bands they used to run these bands in and out like products, and they tend to forget that there's emotions and feelings and, you know, all that stuff. But it's a business, you know, you can't argue with it.
No, for sure. And kind of, I don't know if this is the perfect segue to this question, but, you know, in thinking back to the tie-ins to the movies, and I don't necessarily want to, you know, talk about being a Jackass band or anything like that, but the thing that is interesting to me is when going back and just kind of revisiting the old movies recently was how much of your music was involved, obviously, in the CKY movies, but in various phases. So, like, in CKY, you might have, like, demo versions or something that is so close to the final product, but it's, like, maybe the first mix, not the final. And so it made me kind of, now in 2019 watching these things being like, I remember growing up watching these movies and being like, man, I really wish the version of, Shippensburg or whatever that was in like CKY 2, we'll say, or something. I really wish that was the version that ended up being on, volume 2 or something like that. Like, it's
in those cases, what happened was it wasn't really, a projected, or it wasn't a focal point of what we were doing. Basically, whatever ended up in the videos was whatever mix we had ready at the time. And sometimes what we were trying to get ready wasn't meeting the deadline of when it had to go into the video. So that's why there were unfinished versions of those songs, because band would say, look, we have to have this song by this day, and if we couldn't have it by this day, then we gave them the best version of that song.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a conscious effort to, switch up all the mixes and everything and confuse everyone.
No.
Whatever, it was just whatever was ready at the time.
But it was more so in thinking about how, even the stuff that was basically like just the instrumentation of what would become stuff for IDR, and thinking about how, like, by the time us fans got IDR, it felt like we had lived with a lot of that material for so long. And, I was just kind of thinking about how, like, in the day now of, like, the oversaturation of putting out a record, it's like you guys kind of did it in a way that, because I hate when bands put out, like, half of a record before it comes out, because if, like, it's just almost like, well, I don't care about this record now, because I basically have it, and it's, like, 3 more months. Like, I don't care. But there was something to be said about how you guys were doing it, where you had it in these different, like I said, different iterations of these songs and so forth. And whether it was, on purpose or not is besides the point. But the fan base just kind of grew around that, where it's like everyone kind of was like, well, I love this song as a whole, but I also really love this demo thing because I like how the guitar sounded. I like Deron's vocal effect on this, or, things like that. Have you really thought about how maybe that has added to the legacy, or kind of the lure of the band, of just having so much different content out there before content was king?
Well, you know what? I think it has a lot. It's a good question, and I think it has a lot to do with the quality of the music. I mean, I know what you're saying when one of my favorite bands releases too many songs before the album comes out. I might not really be interested in the songs that they put out before the album. So that'll make me uninterested in the album when it finally comes out. But I think that with the albums that we did, with the fan base that we have, and the people that get or got our music and the music that I write even today, I think that they're excited to get the final product because they like the quality, they enjoy the quality of the music. It depends on who it is, There's some people like the physical format of albums still, and I'm definitely a big supporter of that. So, I mean, I could listen to a whole album. I could own an album digitally, and I would still buy it when it came out, just because I want to own it physically. Right. But it has to do with, it depends on the quality of the music. I've gotten a little bit more into streaming, not much more, but if I come across something I've never heard of and that everybody's talking about how great it is, I'll stream it to see if I like it, and if I like it, I'll buy it. But then there are bands that I like that I'm going to buy their albums anyway.
Right.
So it has to do with how interested in it you are, how much the music connects to you, and how good the music is. Flesh and the Gear as a demo compared to Flesh and the Gear, the final version, is still, considered a good song.
Yes.
So if you're going to take that CD out now and listen to it, well, you're 20 years, too late, but it's still a good song. So it doesn't matter how old it is. But yeah, I mean, I think that releasing something early of something that's not up to par, or something that's, generic or not that great, I don't know, average, whatever, isn't going to do it any favors. So yeah, I mean, I think it just matters what the music is.
Yeah. It also...
Mediocrity. You can only sell mediocrity so much. You know, you can't.
Very true.
People now, especially now, because people aren't going to waste their money before they listen to something, and now you can listen to something before you buy it. That wasn't the case back then. You had to buy records in order to hear that one song you liked, and you ended up with an album that was mostly crap in the end. And that was the record company's plan. Get them to like one song, so they have to buy the whole album. They end up spending $12 on one song, and then you get over the song, and now you're left with the CD. You have to go back to the store and sell it to. So it all depends. It's a huge spectrum. You know, artistry in any type, in any form, is a huge spectrum. There's the good, there's the bad, there's what people think is good, there's what people think is bad, there's what really is bad. You know, everybody is entitled to their opinion, but sometimes people take advantage of having, their own, being able to have their own opinion, because they can say whatever they want about something that obviously isn't good, So it's just a huge, spectrum of good, bad, okay, I hate it, it's awesome, it sucks. It's up for the people to decide.
It was also kind of, and sort of one of the last questions, kind of about this sort of time frame of your career. But, it was kind of interesting in looking back and thinking about, just like I said, like, you were one of the first bands I can think of when, like, illegal downloading, like Kazaa and so forth, was a thing, and people trying to get almost what a prototype of iTunes, where it's like, I really just want this one song, and the only way to get it is like a DVD rip or, whatever. And, like I was saying, with the various forms of your songs over all the videos and the live footage that people were, putting on the internet at the time, and yourself included, it kind of made me wonder if, because that avenue wasn't available around the time of An Answer Can Be Found, if that's potentially why fans didn't support it as much, if that makes sense. Like, 'cause to me, it's like that record is good. Like, I don't, even now by today's standards, I'd never understood why fans didn't seem to like that one as much. And that, looking back, that's one of the few things I can think of, is that it's like, was it because you didn't hear a song or two in another DVD that came out a year or so before the full record came out? Is that why this didn't pan out for everybody?
Well, what happened was it was all relative to what the industry was going through at the time. It's over now. I mean,
the industry?
Yeah, but here's what happened. There was a situation. It was for lack of a better word, what should I use? There was a process going on that was definitely going to happen in the music industry. What was happening is that by 2000, piracy had started on the internet. Mm-hmm. And initially, the record companies thought that this would be good for record sales, but they didn't expect that people would use the piracy and then not buy the record. They thought that having songs online would be good promotion for people to go out to buy the records. But of course, it progressed to a point where piracy got more popular than spending money and going out and buying CDs,
right,
and all that stuff. So what happened was, each year the industry pretty much expected a certain decrease in sales. I think the percent was like over 20 to 30% a year. So when our first album came out, it was basically, if you're going to hear it, you got to buy it. When IDR came out, it was pretty much the same thing. Piracy wasn't huge. It came out in 2002. It was like, if you want to hear it, you got to buy it, or you could go out of your way to find some, really off the mark or hard to find piracy website.
Right.
But it was still cool to go into record stores and buy albums and stuff like that. So that album was very successful. When Answer Can Be Found came out, it was 3 years after IDR, so there was another 40-50% drop in record sales.
Right.
So whatever you had sold in 2002, cut it in half, and that's what you were going to do in 2005. That goes for pretty much every band, unless they had a hit single or something. Answer Can Be Found on paper is our most successful record. Familiar Realm was our biggest hit. Answer Can Be Found was a top 40 album. It was on the charts for 2 weeks. And when IDR was number 99 and was only on the chart for 3 weeks, but ended up selling twice as much because of the industry decrease. So every single artist took a hit in record sales. Answer Can Be Found, by the standards of the decrease in record sales, was just as successful, if not more, than Infiltrate. But since, the numbers, people associate the numbers, what did, Answer Can Be Found sell? It didn't sell as well as IDR. Well, nobody expected it to sell as well, because at that point, half of the record sales were gone, and people were going to start getting the music online for free. So basically, it was just every year, percentage-wise, record sales dropped to the point now where their record sales are 1% of what they were in like 1994.
Yeah.
So if you were going to sell 1 million records in 1994, you'd sell what, 10,000 now?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty much the way it is.
It's kind of funny when people talk about what constitutes, and especially with streaming, which, I mean, we don't have to get into how fucked the streaming numbers are to equal one album actual physical copy sale, but regardless of that, for those who might be listening and don't know, go Google that and have a good laugh about it. But all that being said,
it's crazy.
It's interesting to think about how when you hear of some of the numbers that get thrown around and you're like, oh, this went gold. And they had to decrease what gold and platinum and all of these things actually are.
Well, what's interesting is that the RIAA, the Record Industry Association of America, refuses to drop their level of gold and platinum standards.
I thought they did, and that's how some of the records have started hitting gold and platinum now.
Well, I think in some countries they may have lowered it. I think England might have dropped a gold record from 200,000 to 100,000. I'm not exactly sure, but I know still in the States, 500,000 is gold, 1 million is platinum, and that's the way they see it. You can obtain, if you're somebody like Adele who streams billions of songs, eventually you're going to hit 1 million, 2 million. She sells probably 4 or 5 million.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been 15 million or 20 million.
Probably would have been Diamond.
like a Thriller or a Hysteria,
right?
Or a Black Album. Metallica actually did a really cool thing. Well, it was sneaky, but I mean, it worked. They gave away a copy of their album with each ticket, concert ticket they sold. Mm-hmm. That's how they got their new album to go platinum, because it had fallen off the charts so quickly, because kids either didn't like it or they just went and found it for free. But Metallica was able to get a platinum album out of selling an album with the ticket.
Prince,
the price of the ticket.
Prince ended up doing that and had the #1 album in America, and I was like, I haven't even heard this thing. I didn't even know there was a record. How does he have the #1 record in America? It's because he gave away every album with the ticket purchased, and he hadn't toured in a while, so he, by default, went #1. And I was like,
as long as you don't say it's free.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's another way, you could... bands, record companies look at numbers and they judge bands accordingly. There's other ways to make it look like your record is selling by buying copies from your label and selling them on tour, and then kind of embellishing the numbers a little bit in your favor. You know what I'm saying? Oh, we sold 10 CDs tonight. Let's write down 100. And you can do that. Nielsen SoundScan will let you fill out a form if you're on the road to say how many CDs you sold at each show, and bands can easily make up that number.
Right. So
SoundScan figures record sales are the only people that know the truth are the record company and the artist. Everything else you can get around. Metallica got a platinum record from giving away their record for free, essentially by purchasing a concert ticket.
Just something, I've always wondered, and I've heard this from a few people who have been signed, and this is a trick that they've used, but I've never heard anyone back it up. So maybe you can clarify this for me. I've heard that a good selling technique to inflate your numbers and make them look better than they are is, so like let's say a reissue or a deluxe edition has a DVD in it, that technically that will count as 2 units sold because there's 2 discs.
There was that. They were doing that, but the Nielsen had changed that rule.
Okay.
So now because Kiss, I think Kiss was the last band to do that.
Okay.
What they did was they got a private deal with Walmart, and they sold their album Sonic Boom with the album, a CD of greatest hits re-recorded, and a live DVD.
3 units.
And
Yep.
that counted as 3 units. So first week sales was 180,000 when really they had only sold 60,000 units.
Yeah, Refused did something like that with the Shape of Punk to come on
That
vinyl.
was one of the reasons. Yeah, that was the reason why, and box sets as well. If you shove 10 CDs in a box set and you sell 100,000 of them, that's a platinum box set.
Yeah.
It used to be. I don't think that they do that anymore. There may be exceptions, but I think that they changed the rule on that. They also changed the rule on shipments. Like, case in point, Hoobastank, which used to be really good friends of ours. I've lost touch with them, but they shipped a record gold, which means that that Island Records was able to put 500,000 copies into stores all across the country, but it didn't sell half that. So Island got about 400,000 CDs returned to them, while Hoobastank walked away with a gold record. So it's kind of like, it was kind of like unfair. I mean, there's no, I certainly don't dwell on it. I'm not, I'm not gonna, hold a grudge or anything. But we had worked our ass off to sell 360,000 copies of Infiltrate. So to still not have an award for that, and along comes a band that they pre-order 500,000 and only sell 100, and they still get a gold award. That was not really fair in some people's eyes. So yeah, I mean, I think they've changed all that. Well, of course, because this is like 15 years later, and there aren't even any record stores anyway. So the only way that a band could really cheat, I think, is to do what Metallica did, which I don't think is cheating. I think it's a good way to make people aware of your new album when they come to buy tickets to hear old songs or whatever. They want to know about the albums. They just can't find out because promotion of music is so ignored. It's not everywhere like it used to be. So yeah, it's hard to sell records just because music as a product to buy is not at its peak right now. So, it's slowly turning around. People are using Spotify, record labels are making deals with YouTube and Facebook to change the way streaming is looked at in the way that they pay the artists out for that. But I don't concern myself with that too much because I'm not going to stop making music anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. I'm not driven by the financial aspect of it. It's just something that I love to do and that I'm going to always do anyway.
Kind of speaking to that fact of always kind of being a very DIY band in ethos and just approach and everything, do you feel that has better prepared you for the climate that you are in in the music industry now? Because that's kind of where your mindset has always been.
Well, one of my dreams is I've had many musical dreams. My dreams were I want to be in a band and make a living. That was my biggest goal. I achieved that, but in case that didn't happen, I wanted to open up a chain of record stores. I wanted to be a record company. I wanted to do all kinds of things. But now that I'm trying to realize, I've had Distant Recordings for 20 years now. I put out first my Foreign Objects was a band that I started in high school. Distant Records put out that first CD. We did 1,000 copies of that. What's happening now is that I'm the only employee at Distant Records. So if I mean, it was fine when I would print up 500 copies of something and I'd ship out 500 copies. But now that 96 Bitter Beings has released a record and I get orders for thousands of CDs, it's like now I don't really, I can't hire an employee to help me because they don't understand like my process,
right?
Who I've sent out to already, who's waiting for a CD, how my system works. So I can't really hire help. It's basically all on me. Even if the rest of the band said, Deron, we want to help you do this. It's like the best you can do is put the CDs in the envelopes because I already know whose has gone out and whose hasn't, and it would take up more time for more people to do this. Like too many cooks in the kitchen. So I'm the only employee, and I have to, selling 2,000 CDs takes up a lot of my time. I mean, I'm happy to have that problem, but I mean, shipping out all this physical product, I mean, it gets really tedious. Mm-hmm. So yes, I do need a record company. I am going to have to sign a deal for the next record because I one of the reasons that I'm not on tour right now is because I have about 500 CDs left to ship out. And I mean, think about it. If I have the time to do 30 a day, how long is it still going to take me? So, it's a good problem to have, but it's very hard to do it yourself. And a lot of bands think, we can start our own label, but unless you have the money to hire a staff that knows what they're doing and you have distribution and you don't have to take care of those things, you don't have to send the CDs out yourself, then it's not really do it yourself because you have a staff. So it's not do it yourself. You would just own your own label now. So if I'm going to release the second record, I'm going to need to sign with a label. So that's what's going on right now.
Two things on that. I mean, with Distant Recordings being as old as it is, and with the wealth of knowledge, because I was going to mention the podcast you did with Raab recently, and for those that may be listening to this that don't know that you did a podcast or that Raab has a podcast, go check it out. It's actually on YouTube, and it's partial video, most of it, and it's really good. The one you guys did was really informative and kind of steered me in directions on this that I wasn't. No, I loved it because I think even you made a comment on your Facebook post. It's the longest interview you've done, and I mean, I was hoping to get 30
Raab,
minutes.
If I get Raab on the phone, if he gets me on the phone, we'll talk for 3 hours without even noticing it.
Right.
And it's hard to get me to stop talking it anyway. So, yeah, I mean, we ended up with a 2-hour interview of stuff that I didn't think anybody would be interested in because I wasn't talking about Jackass. I wasn't talking about all that stuff. I was talking about, I basically, just answered questions and did a chronological autobiography of my life.
Right.
And I didn't, who gives a shit? It is what it is. But yeah, I mean.
But the thing, so the two.
We talk.
The two questions that kind of, out of what you were just saying, that kind of, and out of that podcast, you had mentioned, your beginning relationship with Monty Connor, who at the time was an A&R guy for Roadrunner, and as someone who, I mean, he signed one of my friends' bands here in Grand Rapids. So I mean, like, Monty Connor is like a dude I've known of, reading the inside of like Roadrunner like CD booklets and shit. So it's like, that's a big fucking name. And so when I heard that story about how you guys got in contact with each other and just kind of knowing your love of death metal and so forth, and now, thinking about how you were just talking about having Distant Recordings for 20 years, why haven't you ever partnered with and maybe become a subsidiary for somebody else and maybe worked with Roadrunner, where you're like, Distant Recordings is a subsidiary of Roadrunner and they can help you do the things you need for your label, but then you're in turn able to help them maybe sign the next, Malevolent Creation or something like that and take over where Monty left off? Like, has that ever been a thing that you have thought about doing or have been approached to do?
The closest that I came to doing things like that is that I would go to the Roadrunner office and I would pretty much demand that they re-release titles that are out of print.
Okay.
We kind of did a compromise where they did start reissuing albums that they felt that they could sell. But I wanted to do a best of malevolent creation, and honestly, they saw no potential in that at all. And in fact, we actually made a bet. I made a bet with Monte Connor that the album would do at least 5,000 copies, which would make it worth it because it's previously released material. They don't have to pay for it, and it did. So he owes me $100. But as far as starting like a partnership or something, I was on tour. You know, we were on tour for 15 years.
Right.
So I didn't have the time to do that, you know. I enjoy being a record label if I'm shipping, 300 vinyl out, but I can't be a record label if I'm sending out 2,000 CDs. I just can't. I'm proving, I'm learning from that now. The more orders I get, it's like, oh God, it's like cool because, when the orders come in, money goes towards the shipping expenses, which have increased since the time that I started the campaign. So actually, it's gone up to ship a CD in 2015 when we did the campaign, it was like overseas, it was like $8 and now it's $14.
Yeah. So
the prices keep going skyrocketing. So it's not a financial, it's not a huge financial thing. I'm doing a little bit better than breaking even, and I'm doing my work. But essentially, what we're waiting for is to see what Distant Recordings has done digitally, and you have to wait 3 months for those numbers to come in.
Okay.
So our album came out November 28th, and we're not going to find out what we sold digitally until
February.
The end of February or some shit like that.
Yeah.
So that'll probably be the surprising, rewarding part because it did reach certain charts and it did a lot of people are listening to it, a lot of people own it. I'm definitely selling a lot of them. So digitally, I imagine it's doing much better. But shipping physical product out, if it's a couple, fine. If it's this many, I'd rather be on stage. Honestly, I mean, it's just where I need to be at this point. So
I guess that's really as good as any of a segue to kind of talk about the 96 Bitter Beings. We've been talking about in all this industry talk, we've kind of paralleled it between CKY and now 96 Bitter Beings. So I mean, the fact that you put out Acoustified, I had to think about how to say that.
Acoustified, yeah.
Yeah. Putting out Acoustified and now having the successful campaign of Campaign, which when you explained on Raab's podcast that there was someone that was like, I just put that together. And I was like, how did you not put that together right away? But regardless, it's one of those things where, I mean, you're talking about having to ship out so much and doing all of this yourself, DIY. It's got to feel really good. And for those that maybe haven't listened to Raab's podcast, to have the spoiler of the fact that Synergy Restored is basically the record that you're talking about that will be put out through somebody. But this almost is basically a proof of concept. It's almost going back to the CKY Volume 1, like we sold out of 2 pressings.
Yeah.
Ourselves. Oh, by the way, now someone else putting out a pressing. We're selling really good. Oh, we did a picture disc that sold out. We're doing all these variants across different platforms. And so with Campaign and Acoustified doing what it's done and basically doing it through a successful crowdfunding campaign, which really shows proof of concept that it works, that it's like, to me, you've got to feel so proud right now of like the reascension, the rebuilding of something almost from the ground up. Like, it's one thing to do it once, but now here you are basically doing it again all these years later in a completely different environment than what you came up in. So not only does it show that you can adapt to the industry change, but that your fans that have been along from the beginning have followed you. And so it's got to feel really good to just kind of see this outpour of support now.
And I appreciate it beyond any words can describe. I appreciate that you have acknowledged that, and I appreciate that the fans have acknowledged that. But it's kind of like a cheat for me because I love that process of having to climb and start from scratch. I love that process. I enjoy the experiences that I have from starting something fresh and building it and building it and building it, because it keeps me occupied. The one thing that I cannot do is be a part of something that is stagnant or that I know is no longer going to increase. You know, it's like I'd rather get back at the bottom of the ladder and start climbing again than be at the top of the ladder and then climbing down three steps every once in a while until I'm at the bottom. So basically what I'm saying is that I enjoy potential. I enjoy having goals. I enjoy the potential of things that can happen in life, and not just music, but anywhere, you know. What I wanted in a family and all that stuff, I've gotten that. And it's not really just, you know, a story that I can share. It's a story that anybody can have. You know, a lot of people don't realize their potential because they're afraid of maybe what other people are going to think, or they're insecure. And my question is, what's the worst that could happen? You know, anybody can do anything they set their mind to. I believe that because I'm living proof of that. So if whatever keeps people down is irrelevant, and it's not as powerful as they think it is. Insecurity is not a powerful thing. It's something that they come up with in their own mind. Other people don't place as much importance on what you're doing as you do. So you're your own worst critic. You're putting yourself down if you're saying, I want to do this, but what if this happens? Or this is embarrassing. I don't know if I could do this, or people are going to hate me. Or, you know, you can't pay attention to all of that because, yeah, people are going to hate you because you're doing something that they want to do. And hate usually comes from, I don't think it's hate, but it's, you know, it's like envy in reverse. It's like envying somebody instead of saying, wow, you're awesome, this is so cool that you did this. It's like, you suck, you know, you're such an asshole, blah, blah, blah. That's envy in reverse. It's still envy, but it's in a negative form because it's coming from somebody that doesn't have what you could potentially have or what you have. So that's simple psychology. You know, there's only so many emotions in the world. I think there's maybe 6 or 7. And jealousy is huge. Jealousy is a huge emotion. It's a huge, ugly emotion.
It basically causes every other emotion.
It's so, yes, it does. It's so fucking transparent that it's ridiculous to even try to deny it anymore.
Right.
So with that, all that being said, if you're free, if you're cool and comfortable with that knowledge that walking into something or trying to achieve something that's going to be seen by other people, you're not going to please everybody. There are going to be people that are going to lie about not being pleased. There are people that are seriously really not going to be pleased. And then there's going to be people that don't care. But the other side of that is that there's going to be people that will care. They say there's an audience for everything.
Yes.
As long as you care about what you're doing and you enjoy it and you don't notice that you're failing or you don't notice that you're not succeeding as fast as you want, if you're enjoying it, you're already a success.
It's true.
So it just boggles my mind the things that keep people from succeeding at what they want to do. And I wish, you know, another dream of mine was to open a counseling center where I try to talk some sense into people that aren't living up to their potential, you know. And it's sad, really, because I know not everybody can be what they want to be because there aren't enough spots. But that's what separates, I guess, people, you know, with passion from people that just are happy or unhappy just to be alive. So it depends, I guess.
I don't know if I'm going to include this. I might cut this out. I don't know. But it's been really interesting because, as I was kind of saying, like listening to the conversation you did with Raab and then going down the rabbit hole of, no pun intended, I just realized that as I said it. of his podcasts with everybody, basically, and then doing my own dive on watching my old DVDs and so forth, and listening to my CDs and vinyl and so forth, whatnot. You know, it's, you know, I'm 34, I'm going to be 35 in, you know, a handful of months, and it's really weird in thinking about where all of you that I feel like I grew up with, which I'm sure is a common sentiment a lot of your fans have said, but it's so weird here in now I'll say 2019, but really I want to say 2018. But in 2019, looking at all of you and how far all of you have come, a lot of you collectively, as the group, we'll just say a CKY, between the band, the videos, and everything, I think it would be safe to say that everybody probably was like, you guys aren't going to amount to shit, because, like, what is this? But it's like you were just saying that, like,
especially coming from Philadelphia, where nobody got
I'm from Delaware, and you guys gave Delaware enough shit, so... So...
Yeah, I mean, I lived on the pretty much 5 minutes from Delaware when I was in
I grew up in Dover.
Okay.
So it always used to be funny, like, growing out here in the Midwest, when people were like, Wawa, and I'm like, oh, and my ears would perk up, and they're like, what's Wawa? I'm like, God,
Wawa,
you guys just don't know. You just don't know. I can't explain it to you. Like, it's a thing. To the point where, like, eventually I got Wawa tattooed on my forearm, because, like, I just, like, my dad being from out here in the Midwest, when we would take the Ohio Turnpike to the Pennsylvania Turnpike, when you're young, you don't understand distance or time, really, so you just see visual landmarks, and once we started seeing Wawas, I was like, oh, I'm close to home. So Wawa became...
Well, remember Wawa? I can't think of it. It's escaping me right now. Wawa's little jingle that they used to have.
Oh, God.
Wawa.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
If you need the best to do, Wawa. I can't remember what it is.
I don't remember it, but it was very cheesy.
The flying duck or something like that.
The goose.
Yeah, it's a goose.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when...
So Wawa's just pretty much
it's a visual reminder
7-Eleven.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's a visual reminder for me of almost being home. So when a lot of touring bands see it, they're like, holy shit. Like, I remember Dusty from Between the Beard and me being like, that's so fucking rad, I need a photo with that. And I was like, okay. But it's one of those things, though, like, there's a lot of that stuff for me that has nostalgia attached to being home.
Yeah, me too.
For sure.
Even though I've lived in LA since 2001.
That's about when I moved out here in the Midwest in 96. And what's funny is there's a Wawa Canada, which I didn't know about. And once I got the tattoo, old people love coming up to me and be like, oh my God, is that a Wawa Canada tattoo? And I go, no. And they're like, have you ever been? And I go, no. And they're like, I go, what's there to do? It's a pretty desolate town. You go fishing. And I was like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But when I have to try to explain what it is, they seemed equally as upset on the other end, where I'm like, it's a pretty baller-ass convenience store gas station? And they're like, oh. And I was like, they have Hearst potato chips. We don't have those out here. Like, so, I mean...
I used to know the president of Hearst.
Oh, really?
He used to come to our house with huge boxes.
We have bullshit flavors out here, like ketchup.
Yeah,
that sucks.
But you know, in LA you can find anywhere now you can find all kinds of flavored.
Yeah, we still have bullshit flavors like
chips.
jalapeno something or other Hearst potato chips, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But regardless,
when I was a kid, Wawa wasn't a gas station. When I was a kid, Wawa was like a little store that looked like a house.
Yeah.
You went in there and they made sandwiches and
they're so good.
sold Garbage Pail Kids stickers and Slurpees and stuff like that.
It's one of those things, though, that, like, you know, in thinking about how much, you know, those movies have meant to me, and how much of feeling kind of nostalgic in that time period, and seeing how far and how much all of you have grown has been very interesting in the last, for me, I will say, leading up to this conversation, really the last month. I mean, it's like, I feel like a lot of your guys' lives mirrored my friends and I's, and not so much like a lot of people may say, where it's like, oh yeah, my friends and I used to be crazy. It's like, no, like, there was some really fucked up times where it's like Like, I remember learning to make myself throw up so I could go drink more. I would waste hundreds of dollars I just made working a double at a serving. Like, I learned how to hustle and be a really good server so I could go buy booze at the bar and throw all my money away. And it's like, I look back at that time and I see so much of that now in retrospect, and all the stories you guys have told about those times with your each other. And I feel like seeing how you guys have all come out of it gives me hope that it's like, you know, I'm there too, even if I'm 5-10 years beyond, you know, later than you getting to that same thing. It just kind of is interesting in seeing how some of your professional lives, I guess, have paralleled my own life. And I'm sure.
And a lot of other people's lives.
I was going to say, I'm sure you get that same sentiment. Yeah.
Well, also, it has to do with, you know, when you see kids making mistakes that you made, it's not fair for you to tell them or try to educate them to say that they're wrong. You know, when adults used to try to tell me what I was doing was wrong, you know, it was wrong. But basically what I'm trying to say, everybody makes their own mistakes and needs to make their own mistakes, because you're never going to talk a kid into not doing what they think is funny or they think is right or something that will get them attention. And that's, you know, like my parents' generation is so big on saying, like, you shouldn't smoke, you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't use drugs because my generation did it and we all, you know, it's like, well, yeah, but, you know, you figured it out and your generation is like the most successful generation, the baby boomers. You know, you guys were at Woodstock looking like a bunch of fucking idiots, tripping out on acid, you know, dancing around like a dumbass. I want to punch some of the people I see in that footage, you know? And it's like, well, that's not fair. You guys get to make your mistakes and then try to tell us not to do the stuff that you did having fun. Like, fuck that. So I don't try to, you know, as long as it's not going to get my kids in trouble with the law or anything, if they're going to, you know, if they're going to do things and they're going to make mistakes, they're going to experiment with stuff, they have every right to find out what growing up is about.
Yeah.
So I'm not the kind of parent that says, stop being 14 and start being 20. You know, you can't do that. They don't understand it until they make the mistake and pay the consequence. So I think people need to let younger people make mistakes and stop trying to force them to be like they are, who already had their fun and already went through the process.
So obviously, you know, on that Raab podcast, you talked about how there's things coming down the pipeline leading to touring. I saw on your Facebook or somewhere on your socials that a UK tour is slowly in the works and so forth. So obviously 96 Bitter Beings has a lot in store for the new year. Something I just saw leading up to us doing this conversation is Franz is working on doing a remaster of the CKY series. With that being said, is there any plans, and I don't know if you have any hand in this, but is there any plans to remaster any of the old stuff, the music that is?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, I would have to talk to Franz about that, because a lot of people that are in those videos and a lot of things that are in those videos should no longer be in them, or maybe people don't want them to be in them.
Okay.
The CKY videos, when we did them, we were all on the same page. We were all kids and, you know, pretty much in the same mindset. And now, so many years later, that's not the case anymore. You know, I'm not in touch with most of those guys, either because of just haven't been keeping up, you know, like
right.
When Raab did his interview with Ted with Rake, it was like, I love Rake, I just don't live near him anymore. You know, we used to hang out all the time, so we've lost touch. But then there's other people involved in that scenario that I'm not on speaking terms with. Right. You know, so in order for something like that to happen, I think Franz has to understand that, you know, he's going to have to, you know, talk to some people, because, you know, some of us might not want to be a part of that, you know, remastering or reissuing. I mean, I don't see the point in it anyway. I mean, you can find that stuff online. But
it looks
I mean,
haggard,
I don't
no
know.
pun intended.
I'm not, you know, I wasn't really ever really a big part of the videos other than putting music in it. You know, I didn't want to get hurt. You know, I didn't want to break my arm, because then I wouldn't be able to play guitar.
Right.
So, it just was something that, you know, it happened, and I just think that it should be left where it is. I mean, it's still, you can still find it, you can still watch it and everything, but as far as like the business of it, like there's some issues. I mean, there's copyright issues, and there's a few, not me, but there's definitely people involved in those that don't feel that they were fairly compensated and probably don't want to see those reissues happen. So I don't know, but
that's kind of why I wondered how all of this was going on, because like in rewatching my original DVDs, I'm like, yeah, there's so much of this that like shouldn't have happened in the first place, but even now in the litigious world we live in, it's like there's no way this could come back out, I don't think.
Right.
So
yeah, there's moral objections to it. I don't get offended by anything, so I don't mind that. I don't care what, you know, I don't care about the moral, you know, content of it. I'm just, you know, since so much of my work is included in there, I think that I should be, I shouldn't have to hear about Franz's plans through you. You know?
I wondered how much of, I mean, that's why I didn't necessarily want to bring it up, but on the same token, it's like, it's a new developing thing. So I was like, oh, well, maybe in light of all this Raab stuff, you know, getting in touch with everybody, maybe there's some things that we're not privy to, which, you know, it could happen.
It could work out. It could work out if there was a conversation to take place. Me and Franz are on speaking terms for sure. Yeah. You know, I love that guy. He's funny, and he's just a really unique person, and just, you know, we lost touch. We speak very, very occasionally.
Fair enough.
I don't know, for lack of a better word, but I mean, there's so much going on that's unrelated to that.
Right.
As far as some people's health matters, there's health issues. I'm not going to get into that. But there's things that should probably take more precedence over reissuing old videos. I think that there's things that need to be handled that are more important than that.
Totally agree.
I don't think it's in anyone's favor to put that as the main priority right now, especially when some of us are dead and or dying. You know.
Very true.
So it needs tastefully. It needs to be, you know, reviewed.
Yes. All of that aside, in wrapping up, last two questions: what are the plans for 96 Bitter Beings in 2019, and where can everyone find you and or the band online?
Well, thank you. I'm a horrible social media person. I'm on my Facebook. I have an Instagram. I do not run it. I do not go on there. I have to figure it out because I don't have a cell phone, but I'm going to probably get a cell phone soon. Oh my God,
what is that like?
It's not. It has its benefits and it has its disadvantages. Certainly, not being able to call somebody when your car breaks down 50 miles from home is one of the disadvantages. But the benefits is that I don't have to keep looking. The benefits is that I can look people in the face. I don't have to stare down at my phone while I'm trying to talk to somebody.
There you go.
So I'll see how that goes. But we've been rehearsing. We want to get on tour. We want to go out there. My only concern is the practicality of touring in 2019. I mean, are people going to show up? Do I want to play to a half-empty club? I mean, do I want to stare out into an audience that has their phones in my face? I mean, it's going to be stuff that I'm going to have to adapt to, and that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. It's just the practicality of it financially. I mean, if it's going to be it's something that I want to do, and I would do it for free. I just don't want it to have to cost us anything.
Right.
So we just want to build the fan base to the point where we can guarantee that there's enough interest in each town and each city or country that people would want to come out and support the band. And as soon as we get that all situated, as soon as we have a plan to get out there, like I said, Matty Janitis is helping me organize a UK tour, and I have another guy helping me out, and we'll see how that goes. If it's practical, it's in just the negotiating stages right now. But it's also an issue of waiting to put out Synergy so that the label can get us an agency and put us on tour with other bands so we could spread the word. I don't want to go out there blindly like Oil did in 1997. We went out for a week, and it was like the worst week of my life. We thought that just because we were on tour, people were going to show up.
No.
That's not how it works.
No.
See, lesson learned.
There you go.
Lesson learned.
Well, if you guys make it back to Michigan, or I guess in the event of thinking practically in the Midwest, if you're able to,
we will.
Then we'll have to maybe do an in-person and do another chat.
Absolutely. And the album Campaign is available from 96 Bitter Beings on Amazon. It's on iTunes. And you can order a physical copy from me if you want, but I'd prefer Amazon or iTunes.
And I will definitely say, if you haven't listened to it, it is really good. It is exactly what you would hope and expect from Deron. And it just, listening to it, I had a smile on my face the whole time, and I was like, there it is.
Then I did my job.
There you go.
And I'm happy. My Facebook. Our Facebook is facebook.com 96BB Music, I think.
Yep, you're correct.
Okay. That is where we're most active, or I'm most active anyway. I don't. The other guys, so I think there's an Instagram as well.
There is, and there's a Twitter, and I'll put those in the show notes for those that are interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deron, for taking the time, and hopefully we will see you guys on the road in the next couple of months.
You will. I'm going to make it happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. So that was my conversation with Deron Miller of 96 Bitter Beings. Dan sadly couldn't be a part of that, but what did you think of that interview?
I liked it. That's all I have to say. The end. No,
all right.
It was no, it was cool. I really enjoyed some of the weird rabbit holes you guys went down. I liked his little motivational speech towards the middle of it about how you could accomplish anything if you put your mind to it, and then turned right around and said, well, I realize that not everybody can be successful because there's not enough spaces open. And then so that hurt my feelings. I had to kind of sit there and cry about it for a little while, but I think his intention was good with that. And no, he seems to be in a much more mature, positive place than maybe he had been previously in life. I mean, obviously the beginnings of CKY and all that isn't really brought from a place of maturity by any stretch. And but to hear him, as a grown-up talking about grown-up things is kind of refreshing. No more shooting back at people whenever they leave him a 1-star review and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because throughout this podcast, and I think Dan would attest to this with not only being, since his time being here on the show, but I would say even with his own podcast, sometimes we get the opportunity to talk to people that, you've long admired and have a deep part of your childhood or your growing up phase. And, I can't tell you how ensconced CKY was in, me having my first car after I got my driver's license and driving around listening to, the Infiltrate, Destroy, Rebuild record on repeat, and, just driving around Kalamazoo and feeling this sense of freedom and kind of hanging out with my friends and this total, like the CKY movies, kind of, living out those things and having that be the soundtrack to our tomfoolery. And it's weird, 20 years later almost, or 15 years later, getting to talk to the person that's kind of responsible for providing that thing, but also now being able to talk about it as a 34-year-old to someone that I think, if my math is correct, is about 10 years my junior. And is it junior or senior? I think it's junior. But, basically, talking about, as you were saying, some of the things Deron has gone through very publicly with his alcoholism and so forth, and myself included, to be completely honest. And, we're both here, all these years later, and kind of learned how to be a better person, how to be a better man for us as that identify as that. And it's just one of those that it was really interesting to have this conversation now, because there are some of these that I questions that I had, but I definitely don't think I would have been able to articulate myself well enough to talk to someone for an hour about something, because I didn't have any life experiences at that point. And I think that was the thing that I kind of took away from this, was just the human side of this interview that I definitely wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked whenever you were like, teaching myself how to throw up so that I could drink more. I was like, man, that's some adolescence right there.
Basically I had to go to a doctor, and they had told me that I started eroding part of my esophagus away.
That's terrifying.
So basically I was bulimic without being bulimic for the sense of trying to lose weight. I was bulimic in the sense that I just wanted to keep drinking.
Yeah, I mean, you notice that you do know that stuff that you throw up is highly acidic, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a lining in the stomach, not so much the esophagus. But, because you were a certified doctor when you were making these decisions, I'm shocked, that you would have continued living such a horrible lifestyle. But no, we've been there. Whenever I was younger, I definitely came from a more religious background. So, but a lot of the fooling around and stuff was still very much the same. I mean, just even right up to I remember we'd play shows really late at night, and the band would pull our van over in a Kmart parking lot, and we'd set ramps up out of cardboard. We made ramps out of cardboard. And then drove these. We had a unicycle at one point that we had found in a dumpster somewhere, and we were riding a unicycle around, with energy drinks in each hand, which is the alcohol for young Christian kids. So instead of eroding our livers, we really were just trying to erode our heart, get an irregular heartbeat or something out of it. And it did very much the same type of damage. And I look back on that, and I'm like, man, I'm always complaining about how tired I am. When we're doing the podcast, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it's too tiring for me to just sit in front of a computer and talk into a microphone. But when I was whenever I was 16, it was so much fun to do all this crazy stuff that could potentially land me in the hospital.
Yeah.
And so it was nice hearing somebody that used to be kind of more of a proponent of that kind of stuff, kind of have the more adult perspective on it, but also not discount those experiences. You hear so many people always say, oh, I made so many mistakes when I was younger, and I did this and this, and I wish I hadn't, blah blah blah. And I definitely liked his perspective, which was more of no, I mean, you should do all that stuff.
Yeah.
If you're curious about it, because if you put your mind to doing it, you're going to do it. Nobody can stop you.
Yeah.
So learning to live your life is an integral part of learning how to be an adult, and how to do things better than maybe what your first shot at it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I'll say something on during these chats or whatever with people, and to me, as someone who just kind of, I wouldn't say scours the internet for stuff, but typically when I'm doing interviews or whatever, I try to do a modicum of research, so that way I'm not asking something that's been asked a million fucking times. Or if I am, then I'm trying to find the other side of the question that no one has delved down further. That being said, sometimes that leads me into very interesting things where I apparently inform someone of something that they have no clue about, and then I'm like, and it makes me feel real awkward.
Yes, the infamous. So about these videos being remastered and re-released, and he's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yeah, I mean, it's." And he's like, well, somebody's gonna have to have some conversation. And you're like, okay, cool, let's move on to the next. He's like, no. We're talking about. He like yoinked you back in like a fisherman, like. He's like, no. We're not walking away from this. We need to talk about this right now. And I thought that was definitely one of the more fun highlights of it. Was just that because it's a good feeling when somebody's being very real with you.
With me,
whether they're being
or
you,
in general,
me, anybody that you're interviewing, whether it be me, you, anybody, it's funny when somebody is just like, look, let's just cut the canned answers. Let's cut the, through, like, I didn't know about this. Cause like he could have answered that really diplomatically and just been like, and I think he was diplomatic as he could have been, considering his obvious feelings about the subject. But when you're like, yeah, I think these are going to get re-released or, something like that. He's like, well, I don't know anything about that. And I mean, I don't know why you'd want to anyway, because actually the first thing he said was, you said, do you think these are going to be re-released? And he goes, definitely not. That's definitely not being worked on. And, and I know, John, you had information that definitely leads one to believe exactly the contrary.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, definitely not. It's not being worked on. And you're like, well, and then you're like, oh no, I hit a landmine here. I should probably step off of it. But he's like, no. He pulled you right back on. And you guys talked about it. But it was kind of like, I definitely, to his point, agree with what he's saying about that.
Yeah.
Like you can't just re-release something like that without getting the approval of everybody that was involved.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, they're not all on the same page. They don't all talk. And so it's a really delicate situation if that is what's happening. And this is probably the very first podcast where that side of it has been discussed.
And the thing that gets kind of awkward about it is I wanted to treat it with the respect of what BAM was, however you want to phrase it, currently going through, obviously not addressing the elephant in the room of, the CKY going on without Deron or however that is going on. I don't need to know. But also didn't really want it to come back to like Ryan and stuff like that. Because you could almost argue that there's a lot of things stemming from that circumstance that have led to a lot of other things. So with that being said, I tried, as soon as it started kind of veering, like, well, there's some of us that aren't around. I was like, yep, I know where this is going. And I didn't really want to take it there because it's not.
It was such a positive conversation up to that point.
Yeah. And to my thing was like, I was just kind of looking to be like, oh, I think it'd be really cool to hear some of the old CKY stuff remastered. That was done, like he said, for a shoestring budget that was just done because something needed to go there in the video. So I was kind of like, oh, it'd be really cool if someone's like, if Franz is going through and restoring and remastering the old CKY movies right now, then it'd be cool to hear some of this stuff brought up to today's standards. So that's kind of where I was going with it. Like, oh, it'll be cool to hear some of this shit. So I definitely was expecting it to go 100% that route. And then when it started going down a completely different route, I was like, oh, shit, I really didn't want to. I really didn't know what was going here, and I didn't necessarily want to take it this direction. And like you said, it was a pretty positive conversation up to there, and I really, knowing that was my last question, there's really no way to go anywhere from there without on a down vibe. So, and I didn't want it to end that way because, by all accounts, it's like 45, 50 minutes of pretty interesting positive stuff, and then it's like, okay, the last 5 minutes is kind of down, and it's like, that sucks.
Sure.
But not to be a Debbie Downer, we are going to slowly wind down this episode. If you would like to keep up with Metal Nexus, you can find Metal Nexus at metalnexus.net. Get all your concert news, reviews, interviews, and more. And if you would like to keep up with them on Facebook, it's simply Metal Nexus. Instagram is metal.nexus, and Twitter is metal_nexus. If you would like to keep up with Deron Miller on Facebook, you can find him at darren.miller.12. There is technically a Twitter, and it's at real Deron Miller, but as you heard, he doesn't run that. And Instagram is DarrenMiller_official. And if you would like to keep up with 96 Bitter Beings, you can find them on Facebook at 96BB Music. Twitter is 96BB Official, and Instagram is 96 Bitter Beings Official. And Dan, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at DiscussMetalDan. You can find me on Facebook under Daniel Terry. You can find my other podcast, Discography Discussion, at discussmetal.com.
And if you would like to follow the podcast, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at BrewSpeakPod. Facebook should be under BrewSpeakPod, but it might be under Brewtally Speaking. I don't know. But if you look up the Brewtally Speaking Podcast, you will find us. You can also listen to us wherever you are. We are on Spotify, we are on SoundCloud, Stitcher, CastBox, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, or whatever the fuck they want to call themselves. If you would like to keep up with our show sponsor, The Bean Bastard, you can find them at thebeanbastard.com. You can follow them and keep up with everything that they have going on Facebook and Instagram at The Bean Bastard. And Dan's going to tell you about 5-star reviews, because we need some more of those.
Yeah, we do. See, we love 5-star reviews here on Brewtally Speaking, and the reason we like them is that I have really low self-esteem. And in order to build that self-esteem back up and make me feel like I'm valuable somehow to this podcast, I mean, you can say whatever you want to say about John, too, but let's just really bring it back to what it's all about, is how I feel about things. 5-star reviews are great. Any platform that you're listening to this podcast on now and you like it, leave us a 5-star review. What that does is that actually helps us be recommended to other people that have never heard the podcast before, that maybe would like to hear an interview with Deron Miller. You know, they wouldn't even know that existed unless they went out looking for it. And I don't know about you, but I don't have time to just search random rock stars' names. I mean, that is actually kind of what we do, but you know what I mean? Like, we really just, we ask for reviews because they make us feel better, and they actually help us come up in search results and get more exposure. It is literally the greatest free thing you can do for us.
So, for the Brewtally Speaking Podcast, I am John.
I'm Dan.
We'll talk to you next time.